order. You all join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A little housekeeping before we start. Do I have any volunteers to end up being scribe for this evening?
I already started.
Okay. Mr. Bennett is volunteered. That's because our scribe, her term was over after the annual town meeting. In the packets that, you got some of the new people got thicker packets than the regular members. You got a disc, which is, got the handbook for the Association of Town Finance. You've got a document, basically all the documents we presently have and we'll be reviewing over the term. There's also some documents that we talked about at the last meeting, which we will probably look at some time in the future. There is some other stuff from other meetings, such as the bond, there's a bond thing, and also about what the tax rate would be for the school, and what our budget is, so we all know where we are budgetary-wise for the year. As part of having new members come in, I'd like to welcome the new members. And what I'm gonna end up doing, and I'll start it off, is just do a little introduction, each of us, so we at least know who we are, give a little bit of background, so we can end up probably working a little bit better. My name is Wilfred Spring. I'm the present chairman of the board. I'm strong into volunteering and serving my community. I've served in the, I'm a veteran. I worked for 30 years for a computer company in different phases, working from supervision all the way up to quality reliability. I do have some background in budgeting and also a background, a minor in accounting. When I went to school many years ago, I don't think accounting has changed that much. I've been on a number of committees and boards for this community, conservation, East Templeton Dam, when we were trying to get that restored. Planning board, I was put onto that. I volunteered for scouts, both young scouts and whatever. So that's kind of a little bit about my background and trying to serve the community that I live in, because I truly like the community that I live in. Jeffrey.
Yes. Jeffrey Bennett, right now the vice chair of this committee, served on a little over a year and a half and was just reappointed for another 3-year term, so we can all have fun together. And sometimes I'm the temporary clerk.
Bob.
Hi, Bob May. I'm a new member. I was just elected, or appointed as it was. Let's see, where to start. Start work history. My basic work history has always revolved around numbers. I've been an estimator, a buyer, foreman, managers, and photolithographic engineer or a 4-color stripper. Just don't ask about that one, you know. I wanted to volunteer in the community for a number of years, but circumstances made that difficult. A number of years ago, I ended up becoming disabled due to a prior accident, and I'm just coming out the backside of that now. So I figured, you know, this is the time. I have the time. I'd like to put in the time, and you know, hopefully I can help.
Good to have you on board.
Thank you.
Julie.
Oh, Julie Farrell. I've lived in the community for over 30 years. I was born near Boston. I come from a large family. My husband comes from a large family. 3 kids all went through Narragansett, all doing well. Nobody's home. Empty nester. I've been a librarian for over 20 years. Before that, I worked a number of different jobs. When my kids were little, I stayed home with them. I got interested in politics through my kids, through school, through doing school council, then school committee. And then I ran for selectman and light and water, and now I'm a member of the advisory committee.
Thanks.
Darlene?
Hi. So my name is Darlene Bulow, happily married, live here in Templeton. I'm a new resident, just bought a house over the winter. Getting to know my surroundings. I grew up in Attleboro, was born in Attleboro. I worked for the city of Attleboro for almost 16 and a half years. And so I know how municipalities are run. They are governed by a mayor. I know this is not governed that way. However, you know, I do understand the legalities of how cities and towns and municipalities operate. I currently work in Worcester for the USDA. I am the program manager assistant. I oversee that Asian longhorn beetle eradication program. And I have a couple years there, but most of my tenure of my career was down in Attleboro. And when my mother-in-law took ill a few years back, that's when I moved up to this area. And she's since passed, but that's what brought me this way. People always ask me, why didn't you stay in Attleboro? But it was because when she was really ill, my husband, being the only child, needed his wife to obviously help him. So we came up and cared for his mom, and that's what led me to this area. I have one daughter who's 30 years old, and I also have one granddaughter, and my daughter and my son-in-law live up in New Hampshire. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to meet all my new neighbors, and hopefully learn a little bit more about you all in the town of Templeton. And I've fallen in love with the town. I've only been here a short period of time, but I really love the town and the people I've met so far.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you.
Paul?
I'm Paul Grubb. I'm recently joined the advisory committee last October and have just been appointed for a 2-year term now. I joined just in time for all the fun with the town budgets, and it was a great learning experience, and had an opportunity to work with a lot of great people. So I'm recently retired. I retired last year after 40 years as a business manager. I was in computer industry for 30 years, and then 10 years with Bank of America, and lived here in Templeton for 30 years now, hard to believe. Haven't done much volunteering until recently, and hope to be able, now that I'm retired, have more time to do more of it.
Bev?
Yeah.
Introduction?
Oh,
Just a little bit about background?
I'm Beverly Bartolomeo. I was Beverly Chipman. My family's been in town for generations. I expect to stay here till I die. I was on the advisory board very early on in the 70s. Was on the Board of Health for a while. I helped Gladys Salem. She was my best friend. She was the first woman selectman in the town of Templeton. We started the craft show together. I plant flowers in front of her stone. Every season I put something there. This will be an education you will never get anywhere else. Paul made the mistake of saying, "How much interest?" And I said, "Oh, do I have a job for you?" Because he lives next to me, kinda, sorta. And we really didn't even know each other. He's been there 30 years. We mind our own business. But this is a good, enjoyable experience for the most part. We have good people. We all work for the same reason, for the people of our town. So, good to meet you.
Thank you.
What's your first name?
Darlene.
Darlene?
And we have a selectman here. I'd like to have him introduce himself. Our newest selectman.
Request for the chairman, Cameron Forts, recently elected selectman, recently nominated vice chairman of the board. I lived in town 23 years, it's my entire life. I'll be 24 in July, so it'll be 24 years. I have 2 degrees, one in economics and one in business finance. I'm currently attending Southern New Hampshire University for a Master's of Science in Finance. I work for a Fortune 500 company as an auditor in Waltham. And, I mean, that's roughly it. I'll keep it short and sweet, just for the sake of the board.
Thank you. In your packet, you'll also notice it was a request of one of the members. It starts off with Templeton Town bylaws, and it goes on to name some other resources, such as the Mass General Law, DOR, and MMA websites. If you go to that, you'll see different things on there. As an example, new growth training, there's Prop 2.5 online training on the DOR site. Mass General Laws, I put the law that actually governs us per se, and the transfers and that we'll be talking about this evening, and also the emergency reserve request that we'll be talking about. And you'll end up seeing a guide to financial management for town officials. Levy limits, those are things that we really need to understand for us to end up doing our job. You'll also see that the MMA website has, as well as the DOR site, has tons of information. I just put down a few things that if you click on those and you go into those, you can end up browsing in those and probably find a lot of information over the course of time. With that said, any question thus far? Okay. The first part will be, we have minutes for May 3rd, the pre-town meeting. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from the pre-town meeting of May 3rd, 2017.
I'll second that.
That should be
We have a
corrected.
motion and a second. Any discussion?
It needs to be corrected to 17, not 16.
Yes. At the top of the minutes.
Yep.
We'll have to end up changing to 2017 before we put it on the website. Thank you. With that correction, 16 instead of 17. Hearing and saying none. Bev?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Darlene?
Yes,
You have to abstain because you weren't here.
I abstain.
This is part of this is part of your learning. Julie?
Yes?
Paul? Excuse me, Bob?
Staying.
Jeff?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Minutes of May 17th.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from May 17th, 2017.
I have a motion to accept the minutes of May 17th, 2017. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? It's got the right year.
It does.
We're off to a good start there.
I try.
Hearing none? Bev?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Darlene?
Abstain.
Thank you. Julie?
Yes.
Bob?
Abstain.
Yes.
Jeff? And I vote yes. I've put in the packet, we had a question about concerning the budget to actual, about one of the expenses concerning the dispatch. I put that in, and as you can see, the response back was it was being paid out of the 911 grant as budgeted for this year. Any discussion on that?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
If I recollect, I think that they've used that for that before. If I remember right,
Yep.
I'm not quite sure that's what they're supposed to do, but I think that's something they've done before.
and you're correct. It was done before, and they were advised not to take and end up doing it again. But,
I think that was in 16 by the town administrator. It was mentioned at a Board of Selectmen's meeting
Right.
for one instance.
Yep.
And then I think it was sent out as an email or an update advisory or whatever, that they was told to refrain from
using 911 grants
for salaries, planning on it
Yep.
especially.
for salaries. Any further discussion on this?
Well, I don't know what you have to do to make selectmen and the administrator and the people that should understand. The DOR told us not to use one-time monies to float the budget. The same thing with this. Grant money is supposed to be used for specific items, and they can continue to keep doing something else. Sooner or later, somebody's gonna get mad.
Well, it will probably show up, or it should show up, if we get audited, that this should not have been used. Yes,
Robert May.
yes.
If I'm not mistaken, and I'm by no stretch a lawyer, but if I'm not mistaken, I did read that, wages were an acceptable use of the 911 grant. So for the legality of using it, we seem to be, okay. Whether we should be planning on it, I think, is the thing that
Yeah.
we need to deal with and resolve.
I
In
read
one
that
form or
also,
another.
and it was basically for administration, rather than to take and end up having it for the actual employees per se. But that was my understanding, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I read that and said, it doesn't sound like they should be.
Well,
But that's-
regardless, it may bite them one of these days if they plan on money and the funds dry up. The state's having problems funding their budget, so you can never know when everything will change. Maybe do.
Anything else on this? Do we wanna respond back to that, or?
No,
I-
do what they want.
Well, I would like to know how much money was spent actually on dispatcher salaries from the grant. How much will be spent and how much was actually spent on other things for the grant? Just a breakdown of
We'll
what
chime
was
in
spent.
if I may.
Yes.
I don't believe any monies from the 911 grant funds were used for any wages currently. That's what the true-up was for, was to use it for the wages.
Well, basically, we asked that question because there's not enough money to
Yeah,
support
it
the
would be a
dispatch
deficit.
function.
And I
And the
don't-
response was back, is that it being paid out of 911 grant as budgeted for this year.
Mm.
I mean, it's here. In fact, you were on copy for it.
I am, I did read it.
Yes.
So what I would just like is a breakdown of how much is being spent from the 911 grant for dispatcher wages.
Is that a motion?
I'll make it a motion. I make a motion that we request a breakdown of the 911 grant and how much was used for dispatch wages.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Bev,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Darlene,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes,
Bob,
Yes.
Yes,
Jeff,
yes.
and I'll vote yes. Again, I'll end up asking, since you brought that up, if you would, Julie,
I will
is
give
to
it an
follow up
attempt.
for us and indicate that you would advise to take and end up doing a follow-up, if you would, please.
I will.
Thank you. The other issue that was on the budget, the actual, and I'm gonna bring it up, was the fact that there was a number of items on the expense budget that were put into deficit. I think we said that we would talk about that a little more at this particular meeting. Is there anything anybody wants to bring up about those 4 accounts?
What handout are we looking at currently?
Pardon me?
Can you just show me which handout shows the deficits? Do you have the
I'm-
paperwork?
I'm sorry, you don't have the.
Oh, I don't have it.
The budget, the actual document.
Okay,
I'll
Do
have
an
to apologize,
expenditure?
that's not in your
That's fine.
packet.
I just wanted to follow along.
The other
if I had
members
it.
do have it, per se.
I just wanted to, thank you.
Yeah, I think May 11th, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, okay with the revenue?
One of the things for the new members, because I know some of the older members do bring their computers or iPads. I will send documents out beforehand. I do bring paper copies, so if you feel free to take it into bringing your computer or pad in, feel free, because you can, we have access to a Wi-Fi.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So which were the other accounts that were overexpended?
One of them was, of course, the school. Let's see,
Okay, both the feasibility and the
the
construction,
feasibility, yep.
okay.
Sounds good.
I'll have to look at the numbers here. Not
So
Not remembering them offhand.
the solid waste disposal had
Yeah.
113.
Solid waste disposal was another. That didn't seem like it should be overdrawn per se. Recycling, revolving account was also overdrawn. That's 3.
The COA revolving,
Yes, I believe that was the other one.
they, like I said, that may be a thing with the reimbursements, but it's still,
All right, so that was the revolver for Mart.
Yeah, COA. Expenses. Any more discussion on that, since it was brought up and we said we'd talk about it more at this meeting? I know the general census at that time said this should have been caught by our accountant and not gone in, because that's the last point of where the monies are. That individual should be able to take and see what's in the account and whether or not there's enough money to take and pay whatever the bill is.
Now, Mr. Chairman, we're not her boss, so it's up to her boss to talk to her about that. I don't know what we can do. We brought it up and Julie,
I don't think we relayed that to anybody per
no,
se.
well,
no, it was just
Apparently.
general discussion, I believe.
I think that was just general discussion. We said we'd table it and talk about it again at this time.
I don't know what you can do. It would seem that Carter should know how things stand. I think he gets his copy.
Well, do we wanna ask the town administrator how these deficits are gonna be dealt with?
We can do that if you make a motion to end up
Alright.
doing that. You know what I'm gonna do.
I know what
next.
you're gonna do.
Yes.
I'm psychic. All right. I make a motion that we ask the town administrator for an explanation of how the deficits in the school feasibility and construction, solid waste disposal, and the revolver for Mart will be handled.
Okay.
I'll
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none. Bev,
Yes.
Paul,
Yeah.
Darlene,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes,
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes.
all right. As directed,
Yes,
okay.
the chairman directs you to end up, please follow up with that.
See, that's what happens when you're good, Jules.
Well, I'm just gonna CC everybody anyway, so we're all in the loop.
Okay. Is that it for budget to actuals? I think, I don't think there's anything else on. We don't have a new one, so that should be out in the next couple of days, and we'll probably address that at our next meeting. Okay. Report on the Association Town Finance Training Section held in Bolton. Well, I was the one that went to this session. Couple things I ended up putting in the packet is the long-range financial projections. It was stated there that
Sent it to you.
that falls under the finance committee or the advisory committee's responsibility to take and end up helping work on that or actually work on it. We haven't had one. We started that a couple of years ago, and there were some suggestions from an actual finance committee from Arlington who has been on the finance committee in Arlington for 30 years. I did get a chance to speak with him about some specifics on that. And when if we get to end up doing this type of document, we can address it at that particular time. So it's a projection going out 5 years. They highly recommended 3 to 5 years. So that's, I couldn't send that to everybody because all I got was a hard copy. I did send the next one about capital budgeting from Tom Morse, for everybody to take and end up looking at it. It gives very good information as to what that community does on their capital budgeting. We have started that in the community when I was first on in 13 or 14, and we've had members on that committee since. Unfortunately, the last couple of years, it hasn't had a quorum. Are there any questions about this particular presentation before I end up doing a summation on the actual training?
Slow down a minute.
Yeah, I can't find what you're looking at.
I did send that to everybody as a email, so I actually have a hard copy for everybody to reference. You had a question, Bev?
No,
Oh, okay.
very nice though.
Just a summation of going there. It was very highly participated in by a large amount of communities. I was surprised that not only were Association of Town Finance or finance committees, advisory committees, or warrant committees, as were known throughout there were selectmen from communities there. There was actually an administrator from a community there that I sat next to. I did speak to both the president of the Association for Town Finances and the treasurer, Alan Tassi?
Justy.
Yes. About some of our concerns that we've talked about here as to how we progress. And his pushback is that this town should be following Mass General Law as to our participation presenting the budget to the community. I'm not gonna get into some of the other stuff that he told me. If you wanna take and get to that offline, I'll be happy to take and share that. Any questions about that? It was an excellent session, I'll tell you. And of course, the free sandwich helped a lot too. He actually asked if some of the people came just for the free sandwiches.
So this is really good because one-time expenditures of more than 25,000 with a useful life of 5 years or more.
Yep.
Yep.
there's some good information. And by the way, this presentation probably is on the MMA website under, the town finances, Association of Town Finances.
So they even go into how much support that the project has,
Yes,
and the priority by the departments.
yep.
e-
I think
Effect
we
on
have-
public health and safety, it's very good.
I can speak for when I was on, and we actually kicked it off, that particular year. It was a good start for, capital planning and getting it laid out for what the capital stuff was. I can't speak for the last couple of years, we have other members. You were on this last year. Do you have anything that you wanna add, as far as our capital planning?
Well, we were fortunate that we were actually able to have a quorum for one meeting.
One meeting?
It needs work. With the reorganization of, the town departments.
Yep.
That had an impact on the way the plan was laid out. So I think, Selectman Morrison has done a lot of that work.
Yes, he has.
But there's still a lot of work to be done.
Right, the model that we used when we initially was Westminster, that town actually has 5 stabilization funds. They have a building one, the building maintenance one, plus the ones that we have, plus some others. I mean, it was phenomenal. We should probably work there at some time in the future as a community.
Well, I think that it's imperative that they have a quorum, because if we had a board that actually worked, we wouldn't be in the position we're in, where we're trying to do 4 or 5 big projects all at one time.
Yeah.
They would have been spaced out, it would have been easier on the tax rate, it would have made more sense.
The first couple of years I was on, we were lucky to have 3 members, and we were able to end up, I mean, we didn't have any money in the capital stabilization per se, but we were able to take and end up getting the documentations laid out and start the process of laying out what we needed over a length of period of time. And I think Doug ran with the ball, because he ended up doing a lot of that on Excel. The Excel sheet is just huge,
But
huge.
I look back, in 2011 was the last written in the town report of the capital planning. And back then, because of financial problems, a lot of the things that they needed to get done didn't get done. They had talked about doing a cemetery back then. And the reason it didn't get done was we were having financial problems. So we have to get ourselves out of the hole and stay out of the hole, because it's been almost 20 years now.
Yeah, we have a lot of wants,
Yeah,
but not a lot of money, unfortunately.
right. Good.
As far as that goes, the capital plan per se, I think, when they ended up redoing for the capital, I hope that helps. I'm concerned, and I voiced that concern about having too many people from the community, and the inability to get anybody to take and beyond that. We will end up, when we reorganize, we'll be appointing somebody for FY18 for that committee. I know that there's at least 1 or 2 people that have spoke to me about getting on to that. So when we reorganize later on this month, we can end up passing that back.
That's an important committee.
And one of the things that we should be doing is, as an advisory, other communities do this, we should also be looking at that and getting our inputs to the selectmen as to whether we agree with what's being presented, because there may be other things that actually should go on.
That was
Yes.
gonna be my only input into this discussion, was that I think from my brief jaunt into the capital planning, it seems as though that we need to focus on what we are going to measure. Cause if we don't, you know, have it on the capital plan, we don't measure it, we have no way to gauge, budget, anything for it.
Right.
And there are buildings, roads, you know, all that stuff aren't on there, and we spend a lot of money on them.
Unfortunately, some of the things that should have been on the capital plan were not brought up by certain entities, and I'm not gonna go through those, to end up being put on the plan. There was a lot of stuff that should have been on that wasn't. Anything else on that?
No,
So we can move on.
it's a start.
Yes. Discussion, a member requested, for a detailed general ledger printout concerning snow and ice fund. And that was Mr. Bennett, if you would, you want to take it end up?
I thought it important because it's around 130,000, and so far, I haven't seen any requests for transfers, or how that's gonna be taken care of. It can be just let go and be on the tax recap sheet and come off of the cherry sheet, the state aid money for the following year. Under the new Municipal Modernization Act, you can, not a good idea in my view, but you can finance, quote unquote, finance that, pay it off over 3 years.
Is it 3 years? I thought it was 5.
Yeah, that's 3, and you can just, but it's,
Poor
and next year,
business.
you know, you're gonna snow and ice deficit spend again. And so I thought, I think it's a good idea to see what was spent and what was it spent on. Another thing that kind of rolls into that is if you watch the fuel fund, the amount of money that was been put into the fuel fund, it used to be split 50,000 for gas and about 50,000 for diesel. Then they just combined it. But they've been making a lot of transfers out of the fuel fund because it appears from the budget versus actual and the records that they're now buying fuel out of snow and ice whenever and they're not using the appropriated fuel at town meeting, so they have
So it's a slush
basically
fund.
extra money to cover, shortfalls. We never have enough money to cover the planned expenses. What's appropriate to spend at town meeting and the revenue sources that we have, it always seems to equal historically, there's not enough there. And we've had this discussion over what revenue number to use to plan on covering your spending plan. But seeing how it's basically your deficit spending, you're charging it. And you're gonna pay for it somehow at a later date. And seeing how so far I've not seen any planned transfers, and whether there's extra funds in 2017, there's transfers before us tonight to cover shortages in 17. So where will the money come from, if it's possible, out of 17 to cover the snow and ice deficit? I just think it's important for this committee to look at the deficit and what was spent for snow and ice. So if we can make any recommendations or come up with anything to do things different, suggestions, plans, whatever, the word you wanna use, to see if we can correct this and plan a little bit better.
Yep.
If we're buying equipment out of snow and ice, why? And is it specific for snow and ice, or is it something that can be used, all throughout the year? Is there a better way to do it? And
Snow
the
and ice
only
should
way
be
that we're
snow
gonna
and
really
ice.
come to a conclusion is, in my belief, is to see what was spent and what it was spent on, and then go from there. And I believe the only way we're gonna find that out is to get a detailed general ledger printout. We did for one other item, was it the fire?
Yes, yes.
Fire department? And it will line by line, it'll show every penny, it's supposed to show every penny, what's been billed and spent up for snow and ice.
Yep.
The fuel, if they bought a piece of equipment, if they repaired something, it'll have the salt, it'll have the hourly salaries for spent on snow and ice time.
No.
I just think it's important thing to do, and it's, comes under the purview of this committee, by the bylaw.
But
I think that it's not, I don't think it's acceptable for any department to have a slush fund. Snow and ice should be for snow and ice alone. And Jeffrey's right. How can we look at what we appropriated this year, so we can figure on next year if all that money didn't go where it was supposed to go and it went off on little projects or repairs? It is what it is, so I think it'd be a good idea to look at that whole thing.
Yep.
We do it for any other department.
yes, Bob.
Yeah. Hi, my question is, do we have a list of what is allowable to spend under the snow and ice budget?
Basically, it has been in the past, as you heard, for salt, for wages, for fuel. It has been used to purchase equipment for the trucks. Unfortunately, there has also been times when it's also to repair some equipment, which should probably come under expenses rather than snow and ice. And I understand that some of this equipment was also used in snow and ice, but it's also used somewhere else. So there's different things under it. I have to agree with Mr. Bennett. If we're on the fuel, as an example, it's been said time and time again, and I've brought this up to some of the administrators in the past, that if we're going to use diesel, which is probably the fuel that's used in snow in the wintertime the most for that, maybe we should be reducing the amount that's allocated for just general fuel and end up increasing the snow and ice budget, since that's where the diesel fuel is being used. Because that way there, if you keep using the diesel fuel and you keep getting the snow and ice down, we're going to end up getting into a deficit.
Well, that's where my question came in, is because if we have, fuel account, that's where fuel should be purchased through the fuel account, and
Right.
snow and ice should be not used for fuel, even if it's for, wintertime use.
Well, I'm sure there's times that they have to use the fuel account for that,
Which,
But I mean, one of the things that we have to be careful of as a community, and we ran into this, is we can't increase snow and ice by whatever amount and then reduce it again, because the state won't allow it. If you reduce it to whatever, say, as an example, we go from 125, which it is now, to 200, and we decide at some point later on, we wanna only do 175. We have to come up at the end of the year for that $25,000 difference that we allocated there. We ran into that, I can't remember which year it was, but that's not something I wanna end up seeing the town do.
It was
Do you remember that year?
10 or 11, maybe 12?
I think it was either 12 or 13,
Yeah.
12, I think.
was it?
I think it was 12. And yeah, you get into trouble because if you increase it and then you decrease it, you can't.
You can't go into the next
You
year, you have to,
can't-
you have to pay for it this
You
year.
can't deficit spend
Yep.
yeah, you get into some, it bites you.
Yeah,
If you
exactly right.
If you don't catch it, and it wasn't caught that year.
Yep.
And then they had to do, I don't know if they took that money out of stables,
We had to
had to
take it-
transfer money out somewhere to pay it.
Right.
Because you can't carry it.
I think they had to go into some accounts and reduce the accounts in order to pay for that. It was like, I can't remember how much it was. It was
And part of it.
$40,000. We went
Yeah.
from 125 to 165.
You can't like take it out of the cherry sheet, so you gotta pay for it.
Yeah.
And that's why they've been reluctant to to change it and even to increase it. I had that discussion with Carter, and he had, recommended a modest increase from 125 to 140, and I thought, I said, I'll just go with 2. He goes, well, where are we gonna get the money? I said, well, it's, you pay for it on this end or that end.
Exactly
I
right.
mean, it always seems, if you look at the past 5 years, what you average to spend it on.
It's not too bad if you have more revenue coming in than you have expenses, but when we're spending just about all the revenue that comes in on the budget, and there is no surplus per se, you can't do that.
And there again is that discussion on what revenue number do you use. If you listen to the auditor, and I know we're getting off topic here, but if you listen to the auditor's report, he says they generally collect 98% of the valuation. Well, if your allowable valuation is, and I'm just making these numbers up, is 10 million, and you're only collecting 98% of that,
Yeah.
that's what, 9,800,000?
Right, that's $200,000
Okay,
short.
so you can't plan on spending 10 mil, cause you
Right.
know historically in the last 5 years,
Yeah.
you've only collected 98%. But I know the law and the DOR and everybody, and a lot of, most towns do it, you're allowed to use your max valuation that you could possibly collect. So you
Yep.
could collect 10 million, but you know you're not gonna collect, and the Temple Stewart American Tissue property is a perfect example. We know we're not collecting those real estate taxes anytime soon. So why do you plan on using or saying you have that money to spend when you know it's not gonna be there? But we use that number, cause
So
it
we
makes
end up in a
everything,
hole.
it makes everything jive. And then you have to make these, in 16, 32 transfers, was it, I believe? Or more,
68.
32 at the,
It
at
was
one
68
meeting,
or
and
72,
then-
some,
And then the special towns
Yep.
in between and the end of the year.
it was
But,
crazy.
I mean, and I know that's another discussion for another day, and we've kicked it around for endless hours, but that's just an example of, it's hard to put money in stabilization, it's hard to increase the snow and ice when you're counting on spending money that you historically, you don't collect.
Just for some of the new members,
So-
he did mention 2 pieces of property in town. The town has not taken them for tax title because they have hazardous waste on it, American Tissue, and also the Temple Stewart's property. And I think that there was a third one, a garage in Baldwinsville, that was also on that list, and it's highly contaminated. If the town took them, we would be liable, is what happened in Orange. They took a gas station, and then the DEP came in, and they had to pay. We can't afford to do that, not with our finances. So I just wanna, he did mention that, and that's revenue that has not come in, about $500,000 or better. Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is American Tissue the one down in Baldwinville where that old water tower used to be
That was Temple Stewart.
Oh, is American Tissue
It's a
the?
paper
It's
mill.
hot dogs.
You know where Lee's Hot Dog
Okay,
is?
that one straight back there?
Yes.
Okay, and that's still abandoned, it's not owned by, or it's owned by whoever
Right.
it was? Okay.
And
He's in jail.
it gave us a lot of pain because they were one of the major things as far as our sewage goes. And when they went, whatever, they no longer got into that. It cost the town a lot of money to take and redo the sewage. And it was a lot of pain for us at that time.
Okay.
That was the first group of Templeton,
So,
the first.
Mr. Bennett, is that a
I
a
will.
motion?
I will make a motion to request the general ledger printout for the snow and ice fund.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Yes,
Mr. Chairman, to Bob's point, though, there's gotta be some pretty stringent policy guidelines around what goes into snow and ice. So, does that exist? I mean, they can't just put any
The
expense
town
into.
has used it for a number of purposes, which in discussions of this committee have been questionable. Let me just put it that way. Whether they're illegal or they shouldn't be done, that's something that would have to be looked into.
But that's an exemption that the state allows. That's the only place where we can exceed.
That's the only place you can
Deficit
deficit spend.
So there must be some definition about what is allowable expenses in that account then.
I think it's very broad, but I'll volunteer to do my best to investigate that and see if I can come up with that for our next meeting.
If you'd like, I can read the statute right now and take a brief 30 seconds.
Sure.
So after it states what the snow and ice fund is, it says any city or town may incur liability and make expenditures in any fiscal year in excess of available appropriations for snow and ice removal, provided that such expenditures are approved by chief administrative officer, provided however that the appropriation for such purposes in said fiscal year equaled or exceeded the appropriation for said purposes in the prior fiscal year. Expenditures made under authority of this section shall be certified to the Board of Assessors and included in the next annual tax rate.
Doesn't cover any, doesn't say too much about equipment, per
No,
se.
it doesn't say anything speaking, and this is just for the snow and ice removal fund.
No
So it's so broad-based that, like I said, we've questioned it, whatever. So I have a motion, second, any more discussion? Okay, the motion is to end up requesting the general ledger printout concerning the snow and ice fund.
Yes, I will write that and send that.
Thank you. As you notice, I try to delegate. At one time, I ended up not delegating, and even though I'm retired, it's too much. Seeing and hearing none, as far as more discussion, Bev,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Darlene,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Bob, Jeff,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. All right, the next thing in your packet, and we were going to end up talking about the general stabilization fund policy that we have. And, it was discussed about reviewing that before we end up going before, or requesting to go before the selectmen and put our hand across the aisle and try to end up working with them on this. In order for us to end up getting the policy correctly stated on what we had, I had to ask what was in the stabilization fund. That became quite the task because, and there's a number of documents in your packet that address that. The first one is, I believe I updated it, yes. FY 18, to put the new the general stabilization number of 95,344. I ended up putting in there, the FY 17, which showed $142,326.99. And just to verify this, I actually went back to the annual town meeting last May, and under the summary, that's the total that was given for the general stabilization, as well as $9,287 for Pajeri, and capital stabilization account of $2,358.
So,
As you notice that,
all right, I'm just trying to sort through my papers here. So we have,
yes, and then there was also
There.
15 I showed,
okay,
Well, we
so
had
we
a-
have some historical stuff.
that we had 100, and stabilization, we had $115,321
For
and
FY
79 cents.
fifteen, FY 17, we thought we had 142,
Yes,
and for FY 18, we have 95.
95, that's right. I did a little more digging, and Paul also, I ended up giving Paul some information. You'll see in the packet, a listing of what was in stabilization, the first column. Second column is the budget for the community from 2003 to 2017. The percentage, as far as what percent the stabilization represents of that particular budget, and also the bond rating. The thing I'd like to point out is that when we had significant amount of in stabilization, that's when we had an A rating. Previous to that, and going back a number of years, because I gave Paul that, going back to 1980-something, all this town had was a BAA rating, because we didn't have that much in stabilization, and that's the only rating that the bond council would give. And I think that's it's got a lot to do with stabilization. I also went one step further and going just informational. There was 2 times that the community actually went to take and end up putting stabilization money in, was in that May 14th, and then less than 6 months later, Article 8, they ended up trying to, oh, not Article 8, it was a different article, but let's see, what's the article number? Article 2, the selectmen and the administrator tried to take $85,000 out of stabilization. Unfortunately, if we had done that, we would have had less than $10,000 in stabilization,
They were
which was,
mad at us,
which was,
we stopped that.
which was really not good. That vote was taken then, and luckily we had presented some information that we had worked on 17, and it was defeated by a hand count, because it takes 2/3 vote to take and get money in and get money out. I also looked at each audit from the auditor's book. I have these, but you'll have to reference to your auditor's thing, which shows the actual stabilization, and it says stabilization general, and this is, and 13, 125,819, which is very close to what's on the state website. And, the following year, general stabilization, in 2014 was $99,936. In the following year, in 15, it was $105,621. And in 16, it was $106,173. That's according to the auditors. I was totally amazed, because that's not what's on the state website. I did some investigation, and I found out that what the state website has is they have, the total that they have for the last couple of years is the general stabilization, Pajari, and the capital stabilization, so they show the total stabilization number is what the town has been putting on the books. Previous to that, it was only general stabilization, as far as I can tell.
So they're making it look fatter then.
Well, with that, we have the policy. I asked everybody to end up with that background that I just gave you, and all the documentation. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get it all to you earlier. But for the FY18, if you'll look at that, I said to take and end up reviewing that, and to take and end up seeing if we want to take and end up making any updates before we make a presentation to the selectmen. And if you notice on the back of the sheet, it says 17 operating budget, 13,672,537, and then it shows our FY18 projected operating budget, 15,608,341, and that was gotten off the documentation. And if you look, it's the percentage, the stabilization represents at 95,000 is 0.00697%. That's 697,000 of 1%. And for 18, that's 61,000 thousandths%. And the decrease is, as you can see, is 0.00087.
Pretty sad.
Not good.
Well, not if you wanna get a bond rating.
So if you wanna take enough going through the document, I'll be willing to, I asked everybody to take a look at it, if there's any changes that you wanna take and discuss. I think it's pretty straightforward. This was accumulation of looking at other communities when this was done back in 13 or 14, I can't remember what year the committee did this. But it was, we actually went to best in class and took the information. If you wanna take a minute to take a look at that, so we can have a discussion.
Well, what am I looking at? I'm lost.
It looks like this on the back.
Yeah.
It has FY18. In the
Yeah.
front, it has the seal and an explanation of what the general stabilization fund is.
Oh, all right, I see it.
Okay.
Yep, thank you. I got buried over here.
I'll start it off because I already wanna take and end up making one minor change. It says general stabilization fund. I would end up putting this as general stabilization fund policy. We've got we've got the town seal on it, but just by making it as a policy.
In order for the town to reestablish a bond rating, the policies that we vote on are
Yep.
gonna be part of that package, right?
Well, I would, like I said, we would present this at a selectmen's meeting. There was a lengthy discussion on financial policies, and later on, there was in the packet, I was just handed that about 4:15 today, as to a layout as to what's gonna be, and I call it a financial management policy versus a financial policy, because there's a distinct difference, because a financial management policy actually talks to the management of certain aspects of the community, and that's best. It's something that we can review and input to the selectmen, but that is probably more to their tune. Some communities actually do, some FinComs actually do the entire policy. Most communities that I looked at, as I told the selectmen, it's usually a joint effort at the ones I looked at, especially the peer communities. It was a kind of like a 3-to-2 ratio, with two FinComs did the whole financial policy, and then you had 3 communities that did a joint between the BOS and the advisory of FinCom.
Can I say something?
Yes.
You know, this is what I wanted for this fiscal year. I told the chairman of the Board of Selectmen that it was time for the town to get it together and be serious. 5 or 10% into stabilization. What did they put in? Zero nada. They spent every cent. So now, we are being told that we have to pay more for a treasurer. We have to pay more for an administrator. We're already spending every dime we have, every nickel we have, and probably pennies underneath the rug. How on earth are we ever gonna do this?
Well,
If they, wait, if
Yep.
they had cut back for a couple of years to let us get some money in a little fund, then we wouldn't be in this shape. But no, they keep spending money we don't have. And you can have all the policies you want, but if they don't follow them, what the hell good do they do?
I don't disagree with what you're saying.
I'm frustrated because this is something we had the golden opportunity to fix things. For once and for all, I swear to God, before I die, I wanna see our town out of the hole. And we have been in the hole for 20 years, and I'm sick of it.
I don't
But-
disagree with you, Bev.
It's
And-
too easy to sit there and say, yes, yes, yes. When the people in this town, for the most part, they're low income. You have a few with money, but the majority of them don't. So you have a reality here and no reality there. It doesn't work. This is why we are where we are.
Well, one of the things that I tried to point out at town meeting was, and I was the one that did not go along with the board to recommend the budget because of different aspects of the budget. There was too many things that I saw as issues. I know that it states in the bylaw that we're supposed to have a column that we put our recommendations. That wasn't offered to us. There was a lot that wasn't offered to us. We made some progress in some areas of the budget process, I agree. But when there seems to be a reluctance on our executive branch to take and end up cutting back, like some other communities have, on services. I personally, this is my personal opinion, is that we could probably cut back the hours. People in the community probably wouldn't even notice that,
We
per
have-
se, because other communities have, and they're in a better financial position, and they're bringing back those hours that they cut for those employees. At some point, you have to do that in order to get money into stabilization and get financially better.
We don't have the revenue to do what people want. When those big businesses walked out the door, nothing ever came to replace them. But the town went along, just like nothing had changed. And we did get raked over the coals, up one side and down the other, because Copeland and Page worked with Charlie Housen, and the town came on the short end of the stick. We don't do well with big projects.
Yes.
We were a little part-time town hall. But I don't know how you're gonna make this better, sorry.
Yes,
So you had mentioned to cut services, and regardless of the revenue that's coming in, to cut services. Just out of a general feel for the conversation, what services would you recommend cutting that would benefit? the
I mean, I said hours, okay?
Well, our services,
Yes.
I mean, generally, services would be cut by.
Most
cutting some.
communities have cut back on their town hall hours.
Okay,
I mean, we're at, I believe it's 38 hours now, that last year. Now it's back to basically 40 hours.
I think it's still 38.
It's still at 38.
Yeah.
But I mean, we could probably cut back even more to take it end up so that we have an excess that we could probably put in to our safety net. I mean, when it really comes down, and let me just read a brief thing off this so you understand what the stabilization. In order for the general stabilization to be able to provide a safety net, it is crucial that it be adequately funded. The advisory believes that the prudent financial policy targets as general stabilization of 5 to 10% of the annual budget. And that's not just what we're saying. We looked at other communities, and most communities, and that, by the way, what does that mean? The 5% is actually $780,000 of our present budget. The 10% is $1,560,000. Some communities have that. It wasn't.
Not many, not in Massachusetts, not many communities. have
Phillipston's got a lot of money.
It wasn't too long ago that Lunenburg, as a community, because I keep track of this, had over $2 million in their stabilization fund, and they weathered a downturn. That's what it's for.
I understand that well, but Mr. Chairman, if I could redirect the question to what I had asked, you had said we need to cut services to
Yes.
increase the stabilization fund. And all I got was to cut town hall hours. Do you have any other remediation for that, or is that just?
Well, I mean, you got other places that you could end up cutting hours also. I mean, you know, I'm not saying that you should end up closing services. They should be at least open for some period of time. I know that there's been discussion by the selectmen, at least brought up by the administrator about closing the COA. I don't think that's that prudent that they can do that. There are some functions that need to still be done as the food pantry and some other services, maybe not for the full 40 hours a week. But it still needs to have some level of that. Same thing with recreation. If you look at the budget, there was a significant amount of money still left in one of the funds for recreation. Could we cut back there? I mean, those are the type of things that you have to look at. It's not, believe me, it's not fun, and it's not something that I relish that they can see the board do, but there comes a time when you really have to bite the bullet. Maybe you could end up grinning and bearing it and saying, I really hate it, but we have to.
Well,
I understand that, fine, that wasn't a personal attack, I was just.
No, I understand that, I just,
Yeah.
I don't take it as a personal attack, it's a general discussion as to some things.
well,
And that's been brought up to some of your select board off on the side and saying, hey, you should be able to take and end up doing this. Yes, Bev?
the girls in the office told me that no one comes in at 7:30 at night. They're open, but nobody comes in. They come in the morning, earlier. They'll get more business then. You know, it's not easy to do, but we cannot continue to limp along without a nickel in the bank. And that's what we've done for too long. We don't have any money. When we had those big businesses, every single year at town meeting, the light company kicked in anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000 a year. The old guys would stand up and say, this is what we have done for you. So they, not only did they use the money from the light company, they took huge chunks out of stabilization.
Yep.
And free cash. And you know what? We didn't have nothing to show for it then.
Well, that was basically that they can end up keeping the tax rate low, which it wasn't prudent.
No.
It wasn't prudent. I've been on a number of boards and fed that back to selectmen from way back, even going back
We
into the
thought that was the
70s.
thing to do.
That was
That's
the
how
trend
they
to get
felt
back to
back
that.
then.
Julie?
But now we know better.
Yeah, I just wanted to get back to,
Yeah.
the Recreation Commission expenses. There was $8,080 budgeted. As of May 11th, there was still $7,246 left in that. And the Recreation will really pick up for the summer program. It'll be the next fiscal year, so this money won't be used.
Have we overfunded? That's,
It's a place where you overfund it. So there are different places where you can look at that, but I'm not sure how, you're gonna make up the snow and ice deficit, how you're gonna make up the $100,000 shortfall that's already built into the budget. Those kinds of things need to be done. So there are places that you can look. If you look at the budget to actual, which I think should come out more often,
I would agree.
just to track it.
I mean, this stabilization, having adequate monies in stabilization, if you ask around any communities to, any finance, it's basically you get the better rates. If you're better financially, and better bond ratings. There's some communities I have talked to, their folks, both, their administrator as well as their finance committee, where they have a AAA rating, unbelievable. And they get interest rates that we would dream of having. I understand that they got a low interest rate on a band, but when you go for a bond, it's not gonna be the same. The market's gonna dictate what we're gonna get. I mean, we have a chart that was put out, and it's on the MMA website for anybody to look at, which shows the interest rate for different bond ratings for different years. And projections that we saw were anywhere from 4% to 5.5% for this community if we get the lowest bond rating.
Do you feel we'll get the lowest bond rating?
Right now, if you just heard what I said about no money in the stabilization, and we had a BAA, in those times, yeah, when we had money in there, we were able to move up to an A3, which is the lowest
I
A.
disagree with you. I don't believe we'll qualify for the lowest bond rating as a municipality.
So anyway,
We're not
We
the,
shall see.
we're
bond
not the
rating
only
will come.
community that would end up with that. Right now, we don't have any, so it's mute. Any other questions on the policy itself for changes?
Mr. Chairman, as far as the FY eighteen operating budget sheet you got here, I think what you've stated as far as the percentage is really 0.697%, not 0.0697%.
I thought I ended up getting that, no? It's not right?
No, I think it's just, the decimal point's gotta get moved
Moved
over.
over two places?
Places, yeah.
Okay.
So what are we recommending here? Everybody's agreeing on this committee, it sounds like we need to do something with our stabilization fund, but we're not recommending that we get the 5% in the next year. That's not realistic,
No.
right?
No.
So what is it that we wanna, reach out to the select board to try to work with them to see if we can
Well,
accomplish
we have it
here?
as a policy.
Yeah.
And we basically have policy targets for the general fund. We're not saying that you're gonna get there today
Okay,
or tomorrow. It may take us a number of years to get there.
so are there
But we-
specific
but the-
things, steps that we want to take right now to, find ways of funding that?
Well, we can't control that. That's up to the select board, when they, especially when this last year. If we had got input into it, maybe we would end up saying, okay, let's save, let's use $100,000 less in the budget and put that into stabilization. That might have been a recommendation that we could have made had we been given the opportunity to do that. Yes,
Mr. Chairman, as my understanding of the charter for the advisory committee, is you guys are to recommend financial policy to us and advise us on financial issues. You guys, the eyes and ears on budgetary matters and monetary matters within the town. You guys did not have any input on the budget?
we did. We sat through some of the sessions. Unfortunately, I was ill. Some of the members sat there, and I viewed one of the sessions, and one of the members brought up something, and it was kind of brushed aside, per se. I think we need to end up having more. It's usually done jointly to set the guidelines as to whether it's level fund, 1% up, 1% down, 2% up, 2% down, et cetera, like that. I mean, that's generally what the type of communications and what the BOS and the advisory could end up doing. Also, in past years, we actually had a column, and it's in the bylaw that we should have a column that we put our recommendations on. That was not something that was granted this year. We asked for the electronic version of all the budget documents by department, and we never received that. I mean, for whatever reason, I'm not gonna end up going into that, but we didn't receive them, because we had looked at that and we wanted, in past years, we have played with different scenarios in the department, saying, okay, and we've met with those departments and saying, okay, do you really need this? And I mean, we went through a much more intense review of the budget in past years. I've been on long enough, so I know this. I mean, it was started in 13 when I first got on by this committee. And in fact, one of the long-term employees that year says, it's about time we start doing this again. I mean, that was the feedback we got, so.
That answered my
Yes, there should be more involvement, by the advisory, and it's, the state law basically says we're the ones that present at town meeting. There's a conflict in the bylaws. We've tried to end up meeting with the select board to end up talking about that. Town council has weighed in on that and said, you need to work this out. The state law does this. You have a strong advisory, you should basically hear them and let them participate more. And that's not been afforded to us. For whatever reason, I'm not gonna end up going there, okay? I mean, that's, yes, go ahead.
I just, I wanted to comment, I attended one of the joint meetings. I was the only representative from the advisory there, because there was a miscommunication. And one of the things I brought up was that if the selectmen were really serious about getting a bond rating back, we were notified that there was going to be money in free cash, that free cash would be certified. I was like, well then, it was supposed to be at the May meeting, and then they said, we'll probably push it off later until the fall. And I go, well, how much of that money is going to be put into stabilization? You should have an article on this warrant, if you're really serious about it, to put money from the free cash into stabilization, and
It's never happened.
I think
like I
at one of
had
those,
3 heads.
I think at one of those meetings, if I recall, because I was there, you brought that up, and the chair at that time threw you out of the meeting.
So,
I have no comment on, I wasn't
I-
on
I'm-
the board.
I'm
just-
I don't represent
that's
the board,
just
so.
how
I
it goes.
understand
I wasn't
that,
on
I'm just-
advisory at that
That's a
time
fact.
either.
I'm just stating a fact, that's what happened.
Okay.
Is there anything else on this policy? Because I can make those changes and get it back to everybody, and we can end up probably trying to set a meeting up with the selectmen at some particular point. I can end up taking care of that. I can talk to the chairman of the select board, see if I can get on the agenda. We can end up presenting our nice graph that was done by Paul as to what the bond ratings are, that they can show what the impact is if you have money in stabilization versus no money in stabilization.
Do you want a motion?
I would entertain one. The other change I saw was at the very bottom. It said FY 178, it should have been
Oh.
18. So those are the only two changes I saw. I don't know if anybody else wants to make any changes. Those are minor changes per se.
Oh, yeah, fiscal 18-178.
I just have a question. Are we going to ask for an explanation of how we went from 145,000 to 106,000 total?
Oh, that was what I
I
wanted
was
to
waiting
know.
for somebody to ask that.
Are we gonna do that?
I think that,
And did we ever have 142 in there?
Well, like I stated, I went back and I did my homework, and it says right there in the summary, and I followed up with the accountant to ask if that was the general fund balance, and I was said yes. And I mean, we're not the ones that generate the warrant.
Mm-hmm.
there's,
That was at the special town meeting in what,
That was-
October?
No, this
October
is
20.
the annual town meeting that they actually showed the amount.
No, but there was a request to transfer.
Oh,
a
yes,
That
special
was
town meeting,
October 20th.
that was on October
2016.
20th.
And we, I remember, cause I read the article, the recommendation with the fund balance in there, and it was to take out 87,005
That's correct.
Mhm.
from it, and if we would've did that, there would
Right.
be
Ten,
very
about
little
10,000.
left in there.
well, if over $30,000 took a powder, there's something that's very, very wrong.
It's
I
more than
think we
10,000, it's probably, I think it's around 40-something
I
thousand.
think we need to find out why, because the only way you can take it out is at town meeting with a 2/3 vote. And that didn't happen. I've gone to every one of them.
That account is supposed to be like a lockbox.
That's what I'm
That's our
saying.
savings. There should be no way the money leaves there, once it's put in. The only way it can go in is 2/3 vote, and come out 2/3 vote. And looking back, we didn't have a 2/3 vote to take any money out since 2013.
Right. So why are the numbers fluctuating? Even in the auditor's report, the numbers fluctuated from year to year.
I
How
agree.
can they fluctuate?
I don't know.
Interest.
Do we have to have the what do you call it?
The forensic audit?
Forensic audit?
Did, Attorney General,
Well, I think we could ask
I think we need to
the
find out.
Department of Revenue. That would be a place to start, right?
Inspector General, I mean, this is crazy. This is crazy.
Well, the
Can we
DOR
just
is,
get a history of the
the
account?
DOR is coming here, and that's on the new business, and I'll talk to
Yeah.
that a little bit later.
I mean,
They
there's
are
only-
requesting
there's
that we meet with them, and I'll talk about that a little bit later.
There's only one way that it comes out,
Yes.
and it's supposed
Could
to
we
be
just
town
get a
meeting.
history of the account?
Well, like I said, I went to the audit, and the numbers are totally different than what's on the state website, number one.
Right, but I just mean you know, if we can get an actual physical statement, a historical statement of the account and the balance, is there such a?
It's on the state website. And that's the sheet that Paul put together. We got that information off the state website. Is this one here, Bob?
Mm-hmm.
And it goes all the way up to 2017.
And what is 2011?
2011, $436,639.
That's in the audit report for fiscal year June 2011. There was an audit done, but it's the same firm, Lance and Heath. I mean, you say whatever you want, but it would have been done for fiscal 12, presented
It
the
was,
spring of 2013.
It was,
correct?
yes.
I wasn't here to get the book. But it was audited, so there should be another book. Several of them, blue, one's a management letter and the other is the financial statements. And it will have the balance of the stabilization
Well,
fund in there.
They should have those then.
And then you have to go through the town meeting records to see if there was any transfers in or out.
I can do that
Votes.
tomorrow.
Well, no, actually, all you have to do is ask the town clerk, because she keeps record of all town meeting, and it has to be
Yeah.
a 2/3 town meeting vote.
Yeah.
So she would have.
But I
that
mean, there is,
information.
so there is a 2012 audit, and there should be a balance in there.
Yes.
So like I said, last one I have up to is 2011. I wasn't around to get the
Yeah.
2012.
The numbers that are on here
I might
for
have it.
13 and 14 are very close to what the auditors had on their sheets. Because in 13, they had 125,819, and we got 125,817. I'm not gonna take and end up
Right.
going chase a dollar here or there.
But, so there are several ways to chase that, to try to compare with what's in the audit reports.
I
Like
can
I
see
said, if you get the-
discrepancy, yeah, but
If you
not-
get the 2012 audit book, it have a number in there, then you gotta go through, either do it yourself or go to the town clerk and get the votes for in and out stabilization. Do the math, compare what's in the recent audit reports, and then compare it with what the number we just got from the town accountant, and they should equal, be, within a couple of bucks. I mean, they should be right on,
Yeah.
but if they're within like $5, I mean, what are you gonna do?
Because I looked at the audit report, and they showed general stabilization is 99,936, unrestricted, which is a negative number, and of 23,122. If you add that to the 99, it comes close to the 125. I mean, I'm not gonna,
Yeah,
it's close,
so,
and that's what was reported to the state. Because I went one step further, I did ask, our assessor's office if the numbers that were how the numbers for stabilization get reported on what document. And I was told that it might be from the accountant, so we would have to ask if the accountant puts that number in or not. I don't know. I didn't get, I wasn't able to take and get the answer for that.
And I believe any money in and out gets reported on the Schedule A, the town accountant, town clerks, because that's the votes, the
Yep.
meeting votes, if money goes in or out.
Yep.
The section that the town clerk does. So, I mean, there's several
Because, I
areas,
mean,
bunch of
really,
different
if-
ways to
I
go
can see
about
discrepancies
tracking it
in
down.
some of the accounts, but this one should be right.
Like I said, the
I'll look through
special
my
town
books
meeting
tomorrow.
of October 20th last year, and they presented us with a total balance of the three funds of,
Yep.
what, 142 something?
Right.
How you go from that to 106 with no votes to take nothing out? Because they wanted to take out 87
We
and a
told
vote
them
got
no.
defeated. So that's a big chunk of money to be off by. I question where that original number to present the town meeting came from. I mean, if you don't have it, then don't give a number.
Bob?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, excuse my, let's say newness here.
Yes.
But this number that, you said Paul got from the state website.
Well, I got that off the state website.
153,875 for 2017. At the bottom of this,
That was what again?
153,875.
Right, and what I found was that the last 3 years, instead of the general stabilization number, because I actually went and asked another person in another community if they end up joining all the stabilization funds when they report, and she says, that's a possibility, but they're only supposed to do the general fund, and if you add that 142 and some of the other ones that they talked about in last May, it does come up to the 153, or close to that 153 number.
Yeah, if you had the Pajari and the capital.
Right, that's correct.
So, somebody did report to the state that there was the 142
That
and
makes it a little
change
bigger,
or
that's
whatever.
all.
Yes.
For 2000, okay.
Yes.
Basically, thank you.
I have two things here going. The first one was taking end up addressing the issue of why the stabilization number is so low compared to what it should be and what was reported. Do I have a motion on that to take and ask that question?
I'll make that motion, but I'm not writing.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second? Any more discussion?
And that's
The only thing is, why is Pajari stabilization? I don't think it should be. It
No.
should be like a trust, shouldn't it?
No,
No?
when that money came into the town, I was on the board, and I brought this up, and they didn't wanna make a capital stabilization just for that money, so we would know that that money would go for a capital project.
Okay.
But we were able to create it, and we did, and we put all that money in there.
Okay.
And some money was taken out for the playground at Gilman Waite.
Yep,
Some money was
150,000.
taken out for 252 Bonneville Road.
Yep.
There was, it was like 300,000, I think,
Yes, there was over 300,000.
to start with.
Okay.
And it's, right now, there's just 900,000 left, but it was a capital stabilization fund, just for that money, so that we could, show the people that when you get a gift from someone,
Yeah.
if you create a capital account, you can show where the money went.
My personal opinion is that one of the things that they went and got, as far as using Pajari, they should have not gone to take and end up doing it for
52.
a building for the
Terrible.
community. I think the man was more into recreation and supplying for the youth, as I recall when it first came on, than to take and end up doing a
That was
building.
another one of those things where the money wasn't there, so.
So I motion a second, any more discussion about this?
And this is for
This is to take and end up requesting,
okay.
an
An
explanation.
accounting of the stabilization fund.
Account of the stabilization, the general stabilization fund.
Okay.
Just how can we reduce it by that much when it takes a 2/3 vote to end up taking the money out? Motion, it's been seconded. Any further discussion? Bev,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Darlene,
Yes.
that was a strong yes.
Well, I haven't said much tonight, so I wanted to, I want to be heard.
Julie,
Yes.
Yes.
Bob, Jeff,
Yes.
and I'll say yes. I guess your chairman will end up doing that. Unless somebody wants to volunteer to end up helping out on that.
I'll get back to you.
You wanna
Okay.
weed my plants? I'll do that.
Now, the other thing is the general stabilization fund and changing the wording to policy, and also at the very bottom, and the decimal places also. Let's make those changes and talk to the chairman about getting on the agenda for the selectmen.
So moved. How's that?
Oh, that was pretty good. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'm a motion to end up making those changes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing and hearing none. Bev,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Darlene,
Yes.
wasn't as strong this time. Julie,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, now you're in the packet, we have before us a request for emergency reserve fund transfer. Everybody's got a copy of that?
Mm-hmm.
The administrator said he couldn't be here to take and discuss it. I requested that maybe somebody would be his representative.
I am not.
Cam didn't volunteer.
Well, I just, the board didn't take a vote, so I can't represent them.
They did take a vote. Oh, no, excuse me.
No,
They didn't.
they didn't.
Not on the reserve. Not on the reserve. You're right.
Because the TA was gonna come.
Yeah. This is to take and end up account, the group insurance,
That is health insurance, correct?
to pay this hasn't got as much information as it's supposed to be. The present balance in the fund is $5,129.23. He's requesting $122,000,
No.
oh, excuse me,
No.
$1,220.
I'll say, cause they ain't 120 grand in the
Boy.
fund.
He's got this on a separate paper, Will.
Well, hey, we can dream, you know?
Yeah.
It shows that
Wanna try these
the,
out?
no, I already got a set. It shows a breakdown on the second page of, what they need it for the insurance. And what they need for a transfer. This is appropriate, by the way, if there's any question. This is unforeseen and unexpected that we are having to take and pay more money for insurance than what was allocated.
I make a motion that we approve this transfer for $1,220, so they can pay their insurance bill.
Okay,
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing and hearing none. And I'm gonna have to take it in, I'm gonna do a roll call because I need to take and end up putting certain informations on here. As the new members can see, that was part of your packet, that this document, and it requires us to take and end up having a vote on it. So there's a motion to accept paying, $1,220 out of the emergency reserve to go into the group insurance account. Bev,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Colleen,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. Let's see, today is 6/7/2017. And I will sign this. I have to make copies for both the accountant and Mr. Terrazini. So I'll have to end up doing that either later today or, because that printer isn't working, so I'll probably have to come back tomorrow. Okay. That goes into my to-do list. The next request is a request for transfer between or within accounts. Everybody got an email with an explanation, but the document I've included also along with the explanation. This is to take it up. This is under Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 16. In the last 2 months of the fiscal year, up until the first 15 days of the new FY year, the selectmen can request this, and it has to be upon agreement of the advisory. There was some pushback last year for some more additional information, but those got squared away. This would be from the town administrator's salary, transferring $3,450 into the town treasurer collector's salary, $950. And as you can see the initials, because there was a mistake, I was at the meeting. And the treasurer collector's clerk wages of $2,500. This is to cover out-of-class pay and staff storage, shortages, excuse me.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion. I only want to bring up one point. I'm not sure why they have a whole month's worth of budget in the treasurer collector's budget in the month of June. I mean, actually, May and June, which I'm not sure why they need to end up putting more money into that account to pay this individual.
I think we'll speak to that.
Yes,
So to my understanding, once again, this is my knowledge, not the Board of Selectmen's or the TA, as it was explained to me, because I had asked the same question. The previous treasurer collector was paid their salary until they resigned, which I think was the 1st of June.
that's correct.
So they had received the month of May. Well, that entire time, the current treasurer collector, or assistant treasurer collector, was filling in as ad hoc responsibility.
Yes, I understand
So
that.
they had to pay those wages as well as the month of June's wages. So there's like a gap, a missing month's worth of wages to be paid.
So that's an additional period of time in May and maybe March, April, that you're saying?
Yes, so
Okay.
that is to my understanding,
Okay,
because I had asked, shouldn't there be money in the assistant treasurer collector position, but apparently it has to be bumped up in pay since it was ad hoc responsibility.
I think that's, yeah, I would probably have to agree with you, because the way he presents it here, is the first 40 hours is that they don't work with the additional compensation. Thereafter, they have to get the remaining time, they have to be compensated at the going rate, basically.
So I have a question,
Yes,
because I'm new
Yes.
also. The town treasurer collector
yes,
and the town treasurer clerk are two different people.
that's
Because
correct.
there's two different account numbers
Yes.
attached to them. And they are hired individuals or are they elected officials?
Hired.
Both of them?
The treasurer collector is appointed.
Okay,
The treasurer collector's clerk is a hired assistant.
okay.
The treasurer collector and the assistant treasurer collector get appointed by the selectmen.
Okay.
Same as the accountant in this community. They're not elected officials. At one time, the treasurer in this community was elected. That didn't work out as well because of the person didn't have the background.
Gotcha.
And there's been issues there. If you wanna take and talk about them on the side, I will be
Yep.
happy to bring you up to date
Just,
on.
yeah, I was just curious about the
Okay.
accounts, that's all.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing and hearing none. Bev,
Yes.
Paul,
Yeah.
Darlene,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes.
This is, Bear, come see
By the way, as you can see, this was signed by
Bear,
the
come
chairman.
see you.
This time he signed it before it came to us, not after. I think, putting out the policy as we did, saying it has to be done and presented to us, for the reserve and also for, end of year transfers was very effective. Okay, that's, the transfers per se. Before I get into, new business, is there any old business?
No.
No old business? Oh, gee, that's unusual. Okay. On the new business, there's a couple of documents that I've included. One is, starts out with DLS. I know on some of these, we probably can't end up getting into much discussion on this. But the long thing about DLS is I wanna take and end up reading the email that went along with this
When did this come in?
today.
Even though it's dated May 23rd?
Well, I received this document today. That's all I can say. I got it in an
Okay.
email today at
Interesting.
2:48 PM, okay?
Who sent it to you from the?
And let me
state?
just read the, this is from the administrator. First, as a reminder, I do have a prior commitment for this evening. I may not be able to attend to discuss the two transfers. Done. I'm hoping that if I cannot be in attendance, the written explanation provided previously were satisfactory. And thank you for the input from our selectmen here. Secondly, I am in the midst of trying to schedule a meeting with DOR to review and discuss their concerns and expectations of the town in closing out FY17, going into FY18 and beyond. The tentative dates are June 28th and June 29th at 6:30. And it says, please ask your members to keep those dates open, and I'll confirm with all involved as soon as I can. Third, excuse me. Third, you may have missed in my email of 5:30, I had asked that you kindly let me have the contact information for your new members, that I may include them in the future transmission. I would ask again for that information, and I was not able to include them in this transmission. Well, I basically got back to him and basically said that the moderator has up until the 30th, and this would be today would be the first meeting that I would end up knowing who the members are, and that I would end up having a members list, and that I would be sending it out to him as well as the selectmen and other people, and that it would probably be more appropriate for us to end up doing this after we reorganize at our next meeting and actually show who the chair, vice chair, and scribe are, so they have that. I'm gonna end up, starting with Bob, I'm gonna end up having a sheet, and if you just check to make sure the information I have on the sheet is correct for you, that will be the basis for the list. Finally, I have included some material with respect to the special finance edition we are now prepared to send to the printer. The first is a draft letter from the BOS, subject to revisions. They will act upon this, on 6/12. The second is a revised report of the advisory committee to correct the poor edit contained in the annual report and included the year-end transfers. As I told you before, we reserve the right to edit material for clarification and to control printing costs. As you see, once revised for format and only those transfers approved, this has gone from 8 pages to 2 while preserving all the required material. I am, of course, open to corrections, any typos or functional errors that will be, that you notice, so please, let me know ASAP. And he had put copies of the document in the box, as well as sending it to us. And I've included that in the packet, so you have paper copies as well as hard copies. Let me address some things that I saw. There's nothing to do with to the community or whatever. It's mainly oh, you made a change, very good. If you'll make the changes on there so we can,
Oh,
okay?
gotcha.
If there's any changes, if there's not. It was, my comment would be back about, as a committee, the bylaw requires us to end up reporting our doings. It doesn't say that we should report them and that somebody can edit our comments. One of the things that I was really surprised at, and I asked a couple of department heads about this, is it says at the bottom of page 51, basically, of the annual report, report created and edited by Holly Young. I don't see how or why an administrator would end up auditing and editing our report, per se, that has gone into the annual report in the past. Our format has followed the format that was required as far as putting it in Word and the type used. I'll let anybody else comment. You can see what he ended up doing, and we'll go from there. It's a much longer version for the new members. Sorry I didn't include that also for you. I know our vice chairman worked this with him.
I spoke to him about it, and his reply to me was, if he would have seen it, he wouldn't have put that much material included in the report. He was puzzled, and he did agree that the reserve fund transfer should be included in the report, because that's under the control of a finance committee, advisory committee. With regards to the rest of all the other financial transfers, his reasoning was they're already covered in another report, and it was too much.
They're not. Okay.
I'm relaying what I was told
Okay.
in the conversation, and it was too long of a report, and he said he wouldn't have included it if he had looked at it. And then that was followed by, they would quote-unquote fix this by including this in an addendum that apparently they're gonna do in conjunction with the accountant and treasurer's report. Because in the annual town report of 16, there is a disclaimer of sorts, or whatever you wanna,
Yep.
adjective you wanna use. Excuse me, due to the audits not being done, they couldn't report, the treasurer and the accountant couldn't report because they didn't have good numbers.
Yep.
My concern, my question about that is, there was transactions done during the year. I hope town's bills were paid, payroll was met, debt payments were made. So there could have been some report of the accountant and the treasurer in there.
I agree.
Uh,
Even if it was to take and say that a final report will be done when the audits are complete.
There was some work done in those offices in all those years. That was my big problem. And that was, when I spoke to him about this, that was the gist of the conversation with the town administrator. That he looked at, well, it's so much, I wouldn't have put all this information in there. But the reserve fund, he said, should have been in there, because that's under your purview.
Yep. The other thing is that our expense account is not on any of this, and accounting for our expenses.
But I agree that if a committee is required, you're required by law to have a report in the annual town report, you submit it, other than language corrections, spelling and stuff like that, at the least, if you have concerns or you think you're gonna leave something out, notify the committee and say, hey, this is my plan and this is why. And then you can, at least the committee can have a chance to agree or disagree and do that. But to just arbitrarily just submit 7 pages and 1 page goes in, and that's it. The only email that I got back with a question of what was submitted was, it had fiscal 11 instead of 16, and I said, that was probably a copy-paste mistake, good catch, please change that to 16. Other than that, that's the only question that I got, submitting that. And I emailed that to the selectman's office because Will was indisposed of at the time.
Well, I just know that traditionally, they have a very hard time getting these reports in a
Yeah.
timely manner
Right.
to include. They were never edited. It was like beating the bushes to get the thing.
Was the
And
big
then
deal.
you just collated it and put it together into the book. The
Well,
annual report.
I'll tell you right now, it was very painful to take and end up coming up with this FY16 report, because I was not giving any information at all as to, luckily I kept the end of year transfers because the last chairman told me to keep those. Some of the other transfers and stuff, I had to go, basically, looking at meeting minutes and trying to come up with a report, and I included everything that we did. It was very inclusive as to what we actually did.
Well, I think that I was very upset with the fact that they had done that. I go back many years in our town reports, because that is the only history that we have. I can go back to 2002, 1999, 1979, and find out how the town was doing, what it was doing. I can find the advisory board, we had a tough year this year, we didn't have enough money. they would not only give you transfers, they would give you information. 1999, they had a hard year, they didn't get any projects done, they barely made it through the year. Why that happened, the state aid got cut 15%. Those are the kinds of things that are our history, and when they neglect to put those in, they're not doing a service to the people that are alive now, but also for the future.
Because one of the things I noted on here is the end of the year transfers. We rejected a number of them, and they had to be resubmitted because how they submitted and what they submitted. And some of them, they actually went out and got other sources because we rejected them, and
Someday
they were
someone will
improper.
look, someone
And
will
then
look down
he
and
did
say,
not
what
include
the hell
those.
were they doing?
He did not include those. Those are things that we ended up doing and reporting on.
You know, somebody may sit back someday and say, what was going on? And then unless there's information, they're not gonna know. And I don't think that's fair. Historically, every single person that works for the town, their wages were listed in the town report, going back to 1800. All of a sudden, they aren't listed anymore. Well, people in this town pay those wages. They have a right to know what people make. So that everyone has a job to do when they make up a town report. And I think it behooves them to do a good job. It's not fair.
Well, what I'd like to take and see on this, okay, is for us to have some time to look at this. I will send out the original report. You have what he did, and the next, table this to the next session. Is that agreeable with everybody? I mean, yes,
Just, do you think you could forward that to my email as well? I'd love to take a look. at
which one would you like?
The long one,
The long
the
one?
one that wasn't included.
Yes, okay,
Thank you.
be happy to.
Now, you can see
At
how,
least one person's interested.
how we got
I'm curious
here.
to see what you.
You're lucky my boss is here because she can end up reminding me that, hey, you have to put Cam on there also.
Oh, I'd shoot you a reminder. Thank you, I do appreciate it.
Okay, so that's taken care of, okay, till the next meeting. The last thing, and like I said, the DLS report, please peruse, we can probably talk about that in depth as well as the other submissions. I mean, we just got this today in the email. I mean, I got those in the box as well as the email that was sent out. I was told to hang around, and I was given a draft, and this was the Templeton Finance Policy Master List with priorities. So, I think that's something else that we probably should review in the future, at the future meeting, and have that as an agenda item also, unless anybody wants to take, end up getting into that now. I take it by the silence, that's the next,
Yeah.
that's for the next meeting.
Yeah. Are they, will there be, are these documents they're working on, or
That's-
have already created?
That's a draft of what they're gonna,
It's a draft of a
of
list.
a list,
Oh,
yes.
So that document that you're holding there is, it was through discussion with the Collins Foundation, no, Collins Center, Collins Foundation's a charity. Collins Center out of UMass Boston, that the TA and the chairman of the board sat at, and they discussed generally what the priorities were. And they had outlined that all the green ones, I think, are number one priority of what they wanna fix first. I think there's 26 of them. The other ones are kinda, less severe issues, although they are still very severe, there's some that do need to get taken care of first. And I had asked the question at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, how many of those policies is the Collins Center gonna take care of? And they didn't get back to us with, we're gonna get through 1 through 26. And so the TA had responded, there's some that he's gonna pick apart and the Collins Center will, come back, I think, in 2 weeks with exactly what they're going to attack.
As you heard me, I was very verbal about this because I got mixed messages from one of your board members as to, no, we're not working on that, and it felt, I think I summed it up pretty well. I didn't feel that it was, we were trying to work together.
If there's any comfort to you, Mr. Chairman, I believe I will be sitting down with the TA and the town accountant. I'm running a spreadsheet right now on how we're remediating this, what the causes were with the issues. We had spoke about that at the workshop.
Yep.
I mean, if you guys have any questions or any input on any of that, feel free to contact me, TA, or the accountant.
Yeah, cause there's certain aspects of this that we would definitely,
Of course,
I mean, you
should
heard
have-
stabilization, also and also the general financial, cause we do have one that's, and you can go on the website and see that. And as I stated, the selectmen voted in, I believe it was late 13 or 14, to use it as goals. And one of your selectmen basically said, yeah, that's still in effect. This board never voted not to take and have it, and it was taken off the website.
Well, I can't speak to that issue, I haven't.
No, I'm just-
delved into it, but I know some of them are operational, say some of the security issues, or say, some of the operations, day-to-day policies, procedures, but there is a lot of fiscal and financial management policy that you guys should definitely be directly involved with.
Yep.
So
Okay.
I value your opinion on any of those issues.
The boards, especially the selectmen, we go through these cycles and they never stop. Like Marco walked out the door, he gave everyone raises. There was no money in the budget for them. The board wouldn't rescind them. So the hole that we were in even got bigger. But the same exact thing has happened a number of times. So I sit here and I'm going like, what the hell? We sat down, Will and I went to a meeting, and remember they had that little guy, he came, it was some kind of a grant, and they were talking about different things that the selectmen wanted to know about. It was all stuff that we had talked about 100 times. And it's like,
Yes,
over and over, it's like,
and
you
some of
don't-
that was passed on
what you
for
don't
whatever
know could
reason.
fill a book.
Bev, I agree. Hopefully, we can end up working with this select board on a better communications here in the future. I'm trying to work with that, with the chairman.
Okay, so.
Is there anything else on the new business? Or old business?
Our next meeting will be the 21st, or are we
Our
having?
next meeting will be the 21st.
June.
At that time,
Yes.
we will end up
Nice try.
having some of these items to end up doing. I don't know if there will be any more into the transfers. My opinion would be that there should be some more into the transfers, especially if they can try to end up getting some of the deficit down in the snow and ice. It's not out of the realm to take and end up doing this. Hopefully, the selectmen will address that at the next meeting, or the next 2 meetings that they would have. Cause we had talked about whether or not we would have a meeting on the 5th. We could end up addressing it then, but then I see, on the schedule, the administrators pointed out that they might end up doing something on the 10th. Well, if we don't know ahead of time on transfers, at least a week ahead, we legitimately, I believe, cannot have an emergency meeting to do in-the-year transfers. That's just my opinion. It
When did-
basically says in the policy, 1 week ahead, I would expect that they would live by that. To do it on the 10th and expect us to do it by the 15th is a little bit difficult.
Well, when is our next meeting after the 21st?
July 5th, and that's the one we talked about, whether or not we would hold that
Right.
depending on on what was going on.
Then why don't we think about it and maybe consider having it on the 12th, which would work, because I don't know if people are going away for the 4th of July.
Right. I did bring that up
You
and
did.
said, okay,
Yeah.
let's think about that the next meeting or two, whether we want to have it on the 5th or change it, because the next meeting after that would be the 19th. Was
yeah.
it 19th?
Yeah,
The
19th.
19th? And that's too late to address any end of the year transfers.
Right. But the 12th would work and.
Right, we could end up, I could end up scheduling something on the 12th. We can end up doing that at that next meeting, if everybody wants to take and think about whether we wanna meet on the 5th or not. Anything else? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second, a motion to adjourn and second, all in
Hey,
favor?
Aye.
Any
no.
opposed?
No. That was Julie motion and Bev second?